Y'all don't even wait, do you? Good morning, good morning, good morning. How y'all doing today? I think today we'll do the bedroom. Why are you bonking me? What did I do? You're so mean to me. What? Thank you for the headbats, and thank you for the, well, no thank you for the bonk, but you know, what can I do about that now? Wanted to bonk me so bad, you're so mean. Here I am trying to be all kind and sweet, and you just bonk me. One sec. Drinking my lovely little coffee. Of course, of course, of course. I need to disable something real quick. I mean, I did say that, you know, I would do it if, a certain thing happened, and it happened, so, you know. It's not like I'm gonna go back on that now. There we go. Okay. My sinuses are hating me right now. How are y'all doing though? How is everybody? Do y'all sleep okay? Ah, there we go. Alright. I did sleep. I just ended up staying up doing another TikTok. And then it was like 10 instead of 9. And so I only got 5 hours of sleep, which isn't enough. Just is not enough. First off, thank you. Nap time for getting first. Door for getting second. Door for getting third. Thank you for checking in, everyone. Hello, Anya, and Karamia, and thanks, and Anya, and Dar, and Nap Time, and Dwarf. Also, it looks like we got followed by somebody this morning. Lady Hayunga. Oh no, Dwarf, are you okay? Well, I hope you get some sleep. I also gotta do the fun thing today, you know, when you get paid and then you put all of your pay into your bills. It's like, yay, I have no more money. Oh well. At least we'll get a Twitch payout soon, and that'll be fun, won't it? Mwah. Get kissed, nerds. I know, right? I hate it so very much. The funny part is only half of my, like, the amount only goes to I just used my money badly for a little while, so now I'm suffering, so even more of my money is going there. I'm just like, nah, why? How dare you? Past Gene, why were you so dumb? Why did you do this? And then past Gene is going to be all like, ah ha 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 ha, deal with it, loser. That's valid. Oh no. There we go. EB. I am so EB, man. I'm so EB. Oh yeah, you're not at home yet, are you? I'm sorry to hear that. Today's a very grumbling day. Today's the maximum grumbles day. I'll be grummaxing today. All right. Grummaxing. No. And wish I had more chicken. Oh, by the way, I got the melon to work. The melon is growing now, and I found out what the issue was. Apparently the issue was that there was no dirt and that it needs a dirt block or a farm block next to it to grow onto. I was wrong. Don't eat my watermelon. Don't you eat my watermelon. I want more. I need my watermelon. Kind of want watermelon, you know. It's been so long since I've had watermelon. Oh, it's been a long time since I had fruit again. Maybe I'll go out today and get some fruit. Yeah, the watermelon probably is not going to be the best right now. What is in season? Good morning, Korea the artist. How you doing? Okay, what fruit is in season that isn't a gourd? I'll go buy some gourds. Did I ever tell you the time that I had fruit flies? And I couldn't figure out for a month, so I had fruit flies. And it turns out we'd had like a decorative gourd that had rotted on the bottom, but it looked perfectly fine on any part that wasn't like pointing away. Like it only rotted just in the bottom. And so, like, that's why we had all these fruit flies. It was awful. The rest was still perfectly intact. Good morning, Real Slim Shady. Thank you for the hydrate, which I just did. Checking in and stretch. Good morning, Kimizu. How you doing? Kimizu, how have your streams been going? Hey, been streaming well. Figs and grapes. Oh, I could go for citrus. Wait, well, like, what's citrus? How is citrus in season? Is that not a tropical fruit? That feels wrong to me. I was in Paris. I would love a pear. Do you know what fruit I don't like much of? I only really like their juices and other things. I don't like eating apples by themselves. I don't like how firm they are. But I like, apple juice, applesauce, apple pies. I just don't like apples that much. I know that you stream. Are you streaming right now? I didn't know that you're streaming right now. But I was just wondering how your streams are going. See, I like all apple things. I just don't like apples. I think it's because I've had issues with my teeth in the past. Oh wait, no, we can't go that way because that way goes to the outside. Yeah, shout it out, Kimizu. God, I love coffee. Do you ever wake up knowing that you snored the night before? I know I definitely snored the night before, and if anybody had been there. Oh, sorry, was that too loud? I owe me when I sip. I apologize. Not my intent to be heard. You wake yourself up by snoring? Oh, I don't know. I'm snoring. I'm out. Yeah, just curious, how are your stream going? Are you enjoying streaming? Okay, good. Should I make it louder? Should I just get right up next to the mic and go? Aggressively loud slurps. Wait, so why is citrus a winter? Citrus being winter feels wrong to me. Like oranges and mandarins? Clementines are clementines. And I guess they're always cheap around this year. I should get a bunch of clementines. That's what I need. Iron, yay. Do they make anything to put fruit in to make it last longer? This. Oh, the golden play button means that they currently have the highest viewed clip. I think it might be a weekly thing. It's weekly, yeah. So nap time is the top clip for this week. Though it might be, It might change to, what's their name? Vividly, if I try something. Okay, you know what's funny? So, TikTok has this, not TikTok, Twitch has this feature that lets me like share the clips outright.
I bought a fluffy bunny keychain. It's super soft.
Well, I forgot to turn that one off. Where's that one? Oh. Let me turn that one off too. My bad, chat. I apologize. I bet it is. Get some naps. Get some naps. Oh, you know, bananas are insane. Bananas upset me also. Because they're just like, we're gonna make all the other food go bad. That's why like whenever I get bananas, I just freeze them now. I might still have frozen bananas. I don't know how long frozen bananas are fine in the fridge. Freezing them? Oh, well, I use them in like smoothies and stuff. And if you're using them for like texture, and like I make like ice cream out of them, and I blend them for various things. Yeah, bananas are mostly just add-ons for me. And to make banana bread too. If you make banana bread, if you use banana bread and you thaw them, then it's fine. Alright, here we go. Wish me luck, chat. You ready? Are you kidding? Are you kidding me? Your eggs all suck. So frustrating. So disappointed in that chicken. I also found out that if you put the light higher on the bamboo, it'll go taller. But it needs light on every part of it to keep growing. I don't know why you won't give me egg. Why won't you give me child? Why won't you give me child? Explain that. Explain that. 1 in 6. 1 in 6. That's not a bad ratio. Hate you. Stop stealing the eggs. I need those. Alright, well. Let's be smart about this. I think what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna go down a level and start digging there. I think I'm just too high for what I'm looking for. Hey Chad, I'm too high. Lamau. 420 ablaze. Do y'all prefer when I whisper? Or when I talk? I can whisper the whole time like this. Or I can just talk softly. There we go. You prefer the talking? I prefer the talking too. Just soft spoken. You like when I switch between? That's fair. Then I can do a little bit of both. Good morning, Beef. How you doing? Wait a second. When I get excited about something, I start whispering. You just like my cute things. You just like it when I'm cute. Isn't that right? You don't want to be vertical. Valid. Such a valid opinion. Such a hot take. That could have been really bad. Bed comfy. Valid. I'm glad your bed is comfy. Hmm. Hmm. Do you think the buns? I know, right? It's kind of crazy. There's iron. Shoot. Okay, I'm gonna go grab the iron. And then we're leaving this area. I'm not going to try to explore these places too much until I have a reliable source of feather, which is what we're waiting on for the chicken. Because once I have the chicken, then I can start making arrows. And then I can actually, handle skillies and everything else a lot easier. Mm-hmm. I didn't bring shears, did I? Shoot. Oh, at least this place is beautiful. Where's the other one? not cool right now. Cave. Yes, we do need redstone. I've been looking for you. And a lion. Finally. Oh, that feels better, having a little bit of iron in my pocket. Got a little change in my pocket going ding-a-ling-a-ling. Won't you call me on the telephone, baby? Give me a ring. Each time it's just the same old thing. Always no hugging, no kissing, don't get a wedding ring. My honey, my baby, don't put my lump on no shelf. You just said no. Have me no lines and keep your hands to yourself. Baby, why you gonna treat me this way? You know I'm still a boy, I still feel the same way. So when she started talking about free milk in the cow, I said, no kissing, don't get a wedding vow. My honey, my baby, don't put my love on no shelf. She said, don't have me no lines and keep your... Hey, Yukiko, how you doing? Yukiko. Oh, baby, why you gonna treat me this way? You know I'm still your lover, boy. I still feel the same way. No, y'all heard me sing last night, didn't you, on the TikToks? Driving in my car right after a beer. Hey, the bus shaped like a deer. Dear, how about you tonight? Drive 100 miles an hour. Little did you know I sold up on girls. I'm drug. This is a gorgeous place. This is so gorgeous. And I think the nicest thing about these places is because it has all this natural light. You just have less monster spawns to begin with. So lush caves are just gorgeous. Might as well grab some gold as well. I'm pretty sure I could use it. There we go. Caviar and cigarettes, well versed in it again. Strode early on. Gibberlicious, gibberino, gibber. Jack and Jim went up a hill. Gibble. You know, I'm gonna call you Mr. Worldwide, because your name's now Gibble. Is it a pit bull? Gibble. Hee hee hee. Anyways, sorry. Hey, there's always the Jibster. Jibster is great. Wash my belly. Yay. Clean my belly. Wash my belly. There you go. Mm-hmm. I missed that piece of iron. There we go. Nice. Very cool. Hmm. 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 That ain't right. Where the hell am I? Oh, thank you for the headpants, by the way. I need to have a thing to. Was that up? Or something. There it is. There it is. Goofy. Hmm. I'm trying to figure out a way to rig a button that'll light up when I have a redeem so I can look at it. Mm-hmm. It's a plan. Alright, what do we got here? Alright. You're doing it. Shim. Yeah. Maybe a little bit. I'm so excited. I am so excited. Look at him. 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 Wait, can I feed you watermelon seed or do you only like a certain kind of seed? I shouldn't have done that. Eat. Grow. 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 be starting a new game today. Oh, you're gonna miss our new game. Can't believe you're gonna be flying, so you're not gonna see my game. You can show it to all your pilot friends. Just put me on the monitor. Broadcast me to the FAA. I don't know, but it is a horror game. I have a collection of the horror games picked out. It's gonna be a cool new game. I've never seen it before. This time we're being smart. Give me. Look how big you are. I'm sorry, nap time. Well, we'll make sure the VOD gets posted. And don't forget, there's always the archive channel that Vanya maintains, which is so cool. It is cool that you get to fly. It's so cool that you can fly. You fly safe, okay? I know you would anyways, even without me saying, but you know. It's one of those things of like, if anything ever happens to somebody and you didn't say something, there's always going to be that slight blame. So I always make sure to tell my friends, hey, drive safe, message me when you get there. Because if I don't say anything, then I'm always going to be like, what if I told them to drive safe? What if that made them slightly more aware? Hi, good morning, Popcat. How you doing? Morning, morning, morning. Mm-hmm. Let's see, what can we do this time? We need dirt. Might need a pick, shouldn't need that. I'll make a trash can today as well. No, she recommended me. Oh, the lovely, lovely Oshi. I'll have to tell Oshi that I appreciate it. Oh, she's very cool. Hoshi's fantastic. I think we love Hoshi here. I hope they're feeling a little bit better today. Because I know they were sick. Thank you so much for the follow. That is the one that I have to remember to turn off. Thank you for the follow, though. I greatly appreciate it. Hoshi's still sick? Hoshi gets sick a lot? I worry about Hoshi. I'll have to check in on him later. He ended early. Oh no. Early for Hoshi or early? I mean, Hoshi normally goes for a few hours, so like 8 hours. Hoshi ending at like a normal time would be. To be fair, I feel like they should only be doing 4, but I do appreciate them doing all that. He got bullied into it. There we go. That sounds more right. You know, spend the time making like TikTok content or something. Because it's a little bit less, taxing and can keep your energy up. Oh, why don't I just... Yeah. Just do this. I got a lot of cleaning done. I didn't get all my cleaning done, but I got a lot of it done. Hi, country. Oh, ayo. How you doing, country? Not a total reset like I was wanting, but ain't too bad. I did have a productive day, though. And company. That's right, chat. You're the company now. One, two, three. Perfect. You feel official? You should. No, pickaxe. Sag. Well, you know what that means. Yay. Country does have cool emotes. Country's cool. My spiral farm. I also realized something really dumb the other day. I've been trying to be so efficient with the way I try to place watermelon, but I'm gone for so long from where I prefer to plant the watermelon. So it makes more sense for me to just place it out. Yeah, so it's going to be the glow stuff should grow down and will spiral up with the different foods. And hypothetically, there's a way I can get it to harvest itself, but a lot of effort. goofy. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, no, I'm really not wanting to do pistons right now. That's why if I do pistons, I put them in like another space. When I make my auto bamboo farm, I'll probably make it somewhere else. Thank you for the follow, Zoom on the Crimson. How you doing? Welcome, welcome. My goal is to partially use copper golems behind the walls. And a water system. I'm doing very well. I slept okay now that I think about it. Which also means we'll probably need to put the chickens somewhere they don't make too much noise. Because we're going to need a lot of chickens. No, why can't you sleep? Are you staying up for something? No. Sounds like the roommates are learning to wake themselves up. Hi, baby, Money and Bubbles, how you doing? Minecraft is going well. We finally got our second chicken. Oh, speaking of. There you go, that should be enough for eggs for now. That's very comfy. These are our morning streams. Our morning streams are a little 2-hour stream segment. And they are, well, like this. You know, I had one, but I don't have any pumpkins this time around. And I can't go above ground to get any pumpkins, so I have to hopefully find some in a dungeon. Or near, like a mob spawn or whatever. That's what I'm looking for. Oh yeah, and afternoons are more energy. Where is it? Thank you. I colored it myself. You may see others with similar, but mine is the one that's like this. have to fix a few spots in there. What did I say? I colored it myself. Gotta give me credit where credit is due. I would put it up on the fridge. Personally. Alright. This'll work. Wow, y'all so mean to me. Oh, that was dumb. There we go. Yeah, exactly. I'm amazing with my handprint turkeys. Y'all should be, praising. I don't. I think this is far away enough for our chickens that they won't be too loud. You know? So we'll start putting chickens all the way out here. Hi, Blue Valley. How you doing? Guess what? You're not. Oh, well, you're not in prison this time. There's definitely some bad parts in here. I'd love some pizza. But some. Yay. Why can't I have pizza? You know, just because of that, I'm going to make my frozen pizza. I've been saving that pizza, but now I'm going to make it. Gene, you can't have pizza. You're too stupid to like pizza. They say. Yeah, like, good morning, good morning. Pizza for breakfast is so good. There we go. I still need to get eggs. I should get eggs. Okay. Okay, what is next? Let me go check on the mushrooms. Let's see how they're doing. I'm gonna try something different here. Hypothetically, they should grow. Hi, Zebra. How you doing? if you insist. I feel like I've given them in less space than that before. No, because today's a good day. Today's the day I work from home. Maybe they know that I might go a little bit longer, and they're like, ooh, more Gene time. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I start stream at about 3:30 to 3:40 every morning a.m. There is also a schedule beneath the stream. Check the stream. MST, yeah. Thank you. No, you and I just have compatible schedules. That's all it is. Morning, Calypsy. Wow, everybody is coming in today. Did I get canceled somewhere? Is that what happened? Thank you. Right. I only just got headphones. Oh, because then people want to go check out why they got canceled. Or somebody's in here being like, oh my god, I can't believe you're streaming. That's crazy. Oh, I am really in a band in real life. I make the almond sound. When I'm late for school, I put toast in my mouth and run with it and everything. I have actually legitimately done that, and I was a little bit upset with myself. Don't worry about why that's hollow. I don't know if I like the bamboo. Mm. 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 Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. I don't think you can hear it, but can you hear my footsteps on this? I might need to turn it up. We're gonna turn it up temporarily. I'm glad. I'm glad I'm your favorite. Little feets. Oh. I forgot I just turned off the audio for the friendly mob so you don't have to hear the chickens clucking all the time. Never mind. We're good. I can just put all the chickens here. I was wondering why they were so quiet. Is that water too loud? I wanted to see if I could get in the noise of the water dripping, but I think it's just too... 1 second. Sorry, chat, my fridge did that thing where it screams. Oh well, it's fine. Oh, no. It stops itself randomly. It did it like for an entire day, and now doesn't do it for an entire day anymore. Honestly, at this point, I'm more like, I'm just glad, it's just not happening all the time. I think there's a way to move baby chickens. Well, I mean, how else am I gonna keep all my stuff chilled properly? They do. Clearly, I need to use the soles of the dam to chill anything properly. Hey, Jack, guess what? Secret tunnel, through the mountain. Secret tunnel. Not gonna tell you what's in the secret tunnel, but there's a secret tunnel. Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool. Sounds cool, doesn't it? Hey, where are your babies? There they are. Thank you for the like. Morning. Oh, I forgot about that. I'm trying out a bot, by the way, chat. We'll see if it's obtrusive or not. I'll probably remove it, honestly. I think it might use some tools that I'm not really a fan of. That could have been bad. God, Mia, how dare you let me forget to put those seeds back? Isn't it? I like making these micro bases. This isn't really a micro base, but I like making these small, confined space bases. That's why I like living in the caves. Just think of a new way of doing things each time. Oh, that's what I need to do. Wow. Called me a liar, even. Trash can. Trash can. I like it. I like my trash can. And you forgot to make a water elevator. Twash. No, I think I need seaweed for that, don't I? Well, what can you do? What can you do? Lonely like you. Pleasurable pain I can choose. Mm-hmm. I have an idea. I like this so much. Oh, that's an idea. What if I put the vines across here so that they go down? Oh, that would be so cool. That's an idea. Yeah. And I can do the same down here. It's gonna be so growy. Don't laugh at the words I use. Gene, why don't you talk anymore? Because everybody makes fun of the words I use. Hi, Penguin. How you doing? Mm-hmm. Oh, well, I hope you get rid of it. And best of luck to you in your getting rid of your flueness. I'm not gonna call you until you're feeling better. You're gonna be sick. I'm glad you won't throw up. It's not the throwing up that bothers me. It's me getting sick that bothers me. I've already been sick. Now I just need to find potatoes, carrots, beets, and pumpkins. Alright, how many eggs do we have now? 6, okay. No spitter to jam. No spitter to jam. Good. My butchery is going to happen at another place. Mm-hmm. Yay, there's one. Don't worry about the butchering that happens behind the scenes, it's fine. No, I'm sorry. Didn't mean to startle you. I like my trash can. I like all of this. It's so silly. I like it. Yeah, it's funny. I don't have a bedroom or anything. Because I should finally make my room. How do you want to do this? I suppose I can make it up here, just a little, and build up this area. It's already partially cleared, so it makes sense. Yeah. This week, off and on, off and on. Right now I'm okay. How's this look? Let me see this compared to. Where's my paneling? But how have you been doing? You having a good one? Hopefully. Okay. I like that's gonna be different. Oh, congrats. Congrats. See, I don't like the color. I like the green better. It's gonna take me so many materials, but it's gonna be worth it. Nice. We'll need a shovel to get rid of the stuff up top. Okay. Oh, I forgot about the vines. There's the idea. What if I get all the way up there and put vines down? Yeah. I like that. Oh, I feel you. Yeah, use is a bit weird on that one, but wish you the best of luck with it. That should grow out, but we'll put a little bit of extra stuff there just in case. Boop. Might as well use all of them that I have. Oh. I had enough to go all the way around. Perfect. There we go. Yes. I am liking this. I think it's funny that our games last the longest when I don't go questing or looking for things. You know, eventually I'm probably gonna have to go to the nether. And there we go, back to this. At some point I need to just download this music, this song, and have it always playing. Falling in lava, who would do that? Me? Never. I've never fallen in lava. That's not a thing I would do. Crazy. Crazy to even suggest or say something like that. Wild. I've never fallen in my life. I'm actually incapable of falling. Gravity does not affect me. It has never affected me. And if you say it has, I'm calling you a liar. That's how I grew so tall. Yeah, gravity just doesn't affect me. The fact you'd even consider calling me a liar is insane. Call me a liar, I ain't calling you a truther. Hey, does it count as a fall if you don't hit the ground? Does it? I say no. It does not. Nice. If only I could figure out how to get a cow. Because that is going to be an issue. I mean, currently the only way I can get books. The only way I can get books right now is to find a zombie librarian. Or find a zombie villager and make them a librarian. But I still have no leather, so... Enjoy your lunch. Oh, no. You can get leather from Hoglands, apparently. There you go. It doesn't mean I have to go to the Nether and fight those things, but you know. It's an option. I feel like I want to keep my iron until I have a more stable source of iron. What are you mehing about? What are you mehing about? Well, that sounds good. Thank you for the check-in from Metal Brocky. Hi. Seeing you a lot here lately. Not that that's a bad thing or anything. Exactly. I find it interesting, especially the consistent lurkers. I think are very cool. Because that means they just like the vibe and the content, the experience. Not to say that I don't like people interact with my streams, but it feels to me like lurkers are the best way to gauge the quality of the content. Because then I know it's not a parasocial thing. They just like watching. As a person who's had issue with parasocial things in the past. Lurkers the best. Love lurkers. Though I don't mind when lurkers are no longer lurkers. Oh, no, just I exist in a space. The voice and the personality has made quite a few people parasocial. And so that's why I like lurkers, or people who just vibe and exist here. Nice people in chat are also good. You're right, you're right. Fuzz causes an issue for me. Let me actually just light this up a bit. There we go. Yippee yippee yay. The Wild Wild West. The Wild Wild West. Y'all ever seen The Wild Wild West? That was a crazy movie. I don't know how that got made. The 90s made such weird movies, or the early 2000s. Really? Oh, that sounds so cool. I kind of want to go watch that. I am almost at 100 days. I should make a video of when I had 100 days. No, I will not be taking a week off. I will probably continue. I think Co Carnage went like every day for like 4 years. I have to look into how long Co Carnage went, but if I can go hit his, I think I'd be happy. To be fair though, he's a significantly different content creator than I am. 5 years? Maybe. I have plans on aging up the character as well, which I think is going to be fun. Yeah, exactly. And 1 year is not bad, especially, I don't have anything else going on. Maybe after a year I decide I don't want to stream anymore. I might be done. I don't think so, but there's a chance. I'm not writing it off. And maybe after a year I decide that I'm going full voice acting or something. Do you want to know how productive I was yesterday? Not only did I do all the stream stuff and plan out some other stuff, and I planned out pretty much all of my lore, as well as figuring out the system and worked with Aiko to draw the two versions of the Voidlings. There's technically more than that, but there is a whole bunch of different Voidlings. I also got all of my VR chat stuff ready because I got invited to a meet and greet. I contacted a few people about some potential opportunities. And I also I did some other stuff. I did a lot of stuff. By the end of it, it was just crazy. Oh, that's going to be so morbid. I want to do that. I think my idea, chat. I did productive procrastination. Well, it was a lot of stuff that I needed to do. There's a lot of stuff that I had been forgetting to do. For instance, for the VR chat stuff, the meet and greet, I needed to get them my VR chat username, and I also needed to find a model. So I spent $15 on a cool little pixely character. I also made sure my mic worked. And on top of that, I figured out how to, when I do get a 3D model, how I can do live streaming with it. That's going to feel really cool and organic, like how Fillion does it. And I filled some bags of trash and all that, so that was nice. I love when those break. Where's this zombie? I hope you feel better soon. Too soon. Hi, Jack 00. Okay, kein Englisch. Warum willst du, dass ich kein Englisch spreche? Wanda? Ja, na, ich kann gern Englisch sprechen jetzt. So, wie geht's? Was ist los? Ja, aber du hast gesagt, dass ich kein Englisch spreche. What other language am I supposed to speak? You said no English. Yiddish, yeah. Um, mm, um, I got nothing. Oh, that would have been bad. Secret tunnel, secret tunnel, near the mountain, secret, secret tunnel. No, just kidding, we're not gonna go see that right now. You thought. I'll be right back, Chad. Give me just a moment. Y'all did very well. I'm proud of you. Nap time, by the way. Am I muted? Oh, okay. No, I intentionally had mute on before I got in. Good. Yeah. One day we might use mouth movements instead of sound movements from my mouth, but till then. Yeah, nap time, you're second place in total rankings, by the way, in case you're curious. In total rankings, you are second place. Well, it's just in my stream. Only in my stream. I can't fall through the carpet. Ah, it's so lame. I wish I could fall through the carpet. Interesting, though. I think Gibbets is higher. Yep, Gibbets is number 1 at 81. Nap time is 60. And Carnia is 36. Gibbets is number 1. It was his hat. Gibbets is number 1. Exactly. I'm so glad you got that reference. Mwah. Good. Okay, sorry, we're back at it. Let's see. Well, I'm proud of you for being proud of that. I should set up a smelter, shouldn't I? What do I want to set up the smelter? Honestly, this whole area is kind of useless to me. I should set up like a space for monsters to spawn. So many ideas, so many ideas. The mushroom spawner? Maybe. I think I need to clear out more space. Who knows? Jeez, that's crazy. You must be obsessed with them. What? God, I can't believe you like VTubers that much. Even I don't like VTubers that much. That's not what your For You page is saying. Did you beat the Wordle? Did you win? Did you Wordle good? How good you Wordle? I think I need at least 3, do I? 1, 2, 3. They took your letterboxes. What does that mean? Oh, letterbox. Why'd they do that? Gotcha. Alright. Bye. And do not ever come back. I don't know why they think people care. Mm-hmm. I feel you. I feel you. Mm-hmm. There we go. Oh, interesting. This will be interesting. Welcome, welcome. How you doing today? Thank you for checking in. Thank you for the link, Carmia. I don't know if that feels creepy or if it's a fun bot. What do y'all think? What do you mean? I understand, Wicked. Yeah, seems a little forced. Not really my vibe. I think they're called like ISP or something. No, but you said I finally discovered why. What do you mean you discovered why? What's the reason? I just buy it off of Booth PM. Wicked, you're gonna need to finish your sentences here. You have yet to finish your sentence. You don't want to say the truth to mention. The truth of what? Why I didn't credit the artist? That's just something that I haven't thought about doing. Because it is a mass-produced model that many people use. What are you talking about? Yes, honey, it is a... Are you slow? Honey, there's like 30 or 40 people who have the same model. It's not dyslexic, you're just not paying attention. We talk about it all the time. It's a very popular model because, I mean, here, look. I've shown everybody this before. But, one sec. Here. This is the original coloration of it. And this is a recolor that I did initially. Then we have my red recoloration. So yeah, this is how the original model looks. It's mass produced. You'd be surprised that most of the people who do VTuber stuff are using pre-made models. No, because this cost me $30 to get. If I were to have to get like something at this level, with this amount of animation, cheeks, and everything else, this would cost me $10,000. This model would probably cost me $10,000. Minimum $5,000, $8,000. Snow Bear Project, that's who makes it. So yeah, if you're... There it is. Yeah. It's also why I don't sell merch, though. Because for me to sell merch, I would have to, well, go bad. For me to sell merch, I'd have to have commercial rights to this model, and I do not have commercial rights to the model. Yeah, the model that I want to get right now is probably going to cost me about $5,000. But then I can sell merchandise. That'll be nice. Well, yeah, so I mean, I can make merchandise right now, but there are certain things like things that would include my model. Like there's this one thing that allows you to you know the Cameo. There's basically Cameo for VTubers where people can pay to have me say certain things. Well, because I don't have rights to the model, I can't do that. Yeah. Three, four. 1, 2, 3, 4. Mm. This is going to take forever to clear out. But at least looks like we're getting a decent amount of iron. I'll have to make at least one more pickaxe. This might be worth it. How are we doing on eggs? Man, I wish that was an option. Yes, now time. Good. It would be nice, wouldn't it? One day, one day. Thank you for the follow. Maybe you're not. How you doing? Imagine. That definitely ain't happening. That's what I need to do. How you doing? Maybe you're not. Huh? There we are. I know. I still think it's goofy. I should have made a pickaxe. I forgot to make a pickaxe. Dang. Guess we're going back. Alright. Do I have any wood? No. Thank you for the follow, Maxie. Welcome, welcome, welcome. How you doing? There we go. I like the little bug-eyed guy. Old friend of mine made that. There we are. He is cute. Old friend. Ancient friend. I mean ancient in the terms of, VTubers. Can I make a copper pressure plate? No, it's so dumb. I have no wood on me. Dang. Wow. Yeah. Get bigger. Grow, child. If I make a metal thing, will it open? I have a theory I want to try out. Okay, come here, chicken. Oh no, oh no. I hope they wouldn't be heavy enough. Hello, Leader Nova. Thank you for following. No, I've only been streaming for like an extra 30 minutes right now. So technically stream usually is already over, but we'll go a little longer this morning. Perfect. Grow, child, so I can make you have kids and murder all of you later. How many years? Oh, wait. Oh. As a VTuber or at all ever? Or content creation at all? In general. Streaming though, right? Off and on for like 6-7 years. VTubing I've done for I think about a year, but I quit for a long time. Yeah. One chunk. I prefer being this me, though. Oh, that's not even a joke. It's just a meme. I don't want to get rid of the cobblestone because what if I need it? I've taken multiple breaks. So like when I was originally streaming, I was doing it just off and on without really much plan. And then VTubing, I took a break for a while, went on hiatus. Then I came back and just completely changed the way my streams went. I like these streams a lot better. My old flesh tubing Twitch channel? Or what are we talking about? Oh, that's fine. All of them have had everything deleted off of them for the most part. The flesh tube. Ooh, flesh tube. Mm-hmm. I like to keep them around for posterity's sake. Plus, I can't actually delete some of them because they had affiliate. It's also how I learned on how to do things differently. For instance, you realize the follower count really doesn't matter. Because I hit over 1,000 twice, but I had like 2 average viewers to 10 average viewers at most. You learn a lot. It's also the realization that you don't just want to stream anything, you want to actually make something, create some stuff. I mean, heck, on one of the streams I used to just get drunk all the time. Play Rainbow Six Siege, that's all I would do. Be funny and goofy and talk to people, but you know, it's only so entertaining. It's like, why would you want to come watch this guy idiot be drunk play Rainbow Six Siege when you can just be drunk and play Rainbow Six Siege yourself? Better person now. Happier person. Blink, 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 blink. Yeah. Let's get you so blinky. Clips of Valorant. No, that was still. Yeah. That's significantly more cringe than too. I so badly wanted to be like the all the funny FPS game players. Existential crisis. I wouldn't call it existential crisis. Yeah, exactly. You know, like they hang out with their buddies and stuff, and they're like, "Yo, here's this joke I made. It's a dark and edgy joke." Anyways, first-person shooter. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And there will be so many of you, and you will be murdered. Yeah. You have RPGs, you have MMOs, you have FPS, you have RTS, you have tabletop RPG or TTRPG. There it is. You have a lot. A B C D L M N O P. Brick. Morning, Moonflower. How you doing? Go do it now. I work out every day now before stream. Yeah, so I'll go for about 30 more minutes. We'll be good. I do about a hour workout before my evening stream. It's a lot of fun. Gotcha, that's fair. Thank you for the check-in, Pink. Morning. I just woke up. I'm having fun zigzagging. Yes. I spin around in a circle really, really fast. Oh, I do impractical, practical workouts. Don't ask me to explain. Oh. Just ping me next time, Pink. You make me worry. You're right, you're right. It's okay. I know you have school and stuff. Just, as a long-time person. Makes me worry if something happened to you. What? Huh? Interesting. What the hell? Iron, yes. Who is it that says what the hell? Which one of you says what the hell? Hmm. Yeah, because it's starting to invade my vocabulary. Where's my hole? Where's my hole? The heck? There it is. Why does that make me worry? What are you gonna do? I suppose we can keep this up for now. There we go. Well, then all you have to do is redeem it. You don't have to miss it. Why would you miss it? It's right there. What is this? Have I been here before? So strange, so strange. Yeah? Technically, I hit affiliates back in, like last month. One, two. I'll remind you in 3 days. I will not remind you in 3 days. I will not remember in 3 days. If you want to remind yourself, you have that option, but I will definitely not remember. What is up, Pink? What is up? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, can't blame me for that one, can you? Mm-hmm. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Damn. which I have good music side. I unfollow people. There are plenty of people that I just follow to somebody shouts them out or something, or that I like the vibe. But then the streams really aren't my thing. Thank you for the hydrate. Totally understandable. True. This does happen. That's also fair. Egg, thank you. Yes, I subscribe. I think it's so funny. This one guy is. Oh man, there's this one guy I used to really like his content, and he's just become not a good guy. Like he's just such a dick. His artist hates him, and he's just like not the best. It's like, man, I liked you. Why did you have to turn out not good? Wait a second. Why did that happen? Why did you get rid of my... This is a problem. Never mind, we're getting rid of all of these. As long as it's a good story. As long as it's a good story. If you eat cocoa beans, you will not eat cocoa beans. It's too bad. Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. There we are. It's finally grew, chat. Then don't say it if you're worried about a ban. It's going to take so long to clear out all of this for the monsters. Mm-hmm. There we go. No, this is just a new variant. That's the jungle chicken. Mm-hmm. Yes. Just happened to be the one I grabbed. Yeah, thanks, bye. Oh, Jibbets, definitely send it to me. I'd like to see it. I like reading poetry and such. It's always very good. So yeah, feel free to send it. There's no reason not to. Everyone gets nervous. I don't know if Isaac get around me. You could send it to my email, LuckyJene@gmail.com. It's my business email. So there you go. If you ever want to send anything directly to me, that works as well. If you find more ions, just go around. Mm-hmm. Might start needing to just use copper again. It's a little bit more fuel efficient. Well, not fuel efficient, but you know what I mean. Cheaper resource. Mm-hmm. There we are. There's that one, and that one, and that one, and this one. And eventually we'll have monsters spawn out here. Maybe I will find a villager, that'd be so nice. That's the goal, that's the goal. If we can get just a library and villager, everything will be perfect. I like your little spinny guys, they're so fun. Oh, of course, hello Seagull, how are you doing? People get relaxed. And I have no problem with people being relaxed. I hear Skeleman. Where are you? Scheiße. That's going to be a problem. That is going to be a problem. I hear you. I know you. I know you're here. Come out, wherever you are. Mm-hmm. Good morning. That is good. I like that one. Okay. What, we have an eye vendor? Look at that. Mm-hmm. Very good. It's maybe time to expand the farm a little bit so I can get some more seeds. Why do you have anxiety? No anxiety is needed. Do not have anxiety. In fact, I do not allow the anxiety. Take it back. Mm-hmm. No anxiety. Get rid of all of the anxiety. How have you? What's the heck? That was 8. 8 heads 3. That is insane. Since when? It will soon be your turn, little chickens. Soon I will come to eat you. Soon. Oh, right. should be taking care of that as well. That was funny. My coworker accidentally started a meeting with everybody. But no, can I stop the Leo voice? By the way? Oh yeah, we're good. Okay, I forget that I'm doing the voices sometimes. Drink. Effort. Let's walk through a seed. kind of digs this. Because the narrow passages means I only fight one at a time. I do need to make sure that I break off some of this though so that they don't get in. So here's what we're going to do. We're breaking this off here. There we go. Oh, no. Hey. Oh, you're right. My bad. I shouldn't have been given that to you for free. There it is. Hi, lady. Gotta see how you doing. It's been a little bit. What have you been up to, sweetie? I should make the smelter. Okay. So that's doing its thing. Where do I want to put the smelter? Could have it end here. You've been a taint deep in collabs? What does that mean? Wow, and not a single invite for your boy. It's your boy. Crazy. It's because you hate me. I see what it is. Honey, I've been in a video game. I have a demo reel. Have you not seen my demo reel? Yeah. Thank you for the follow. Ah, Mads. Madeline. Maddie. I like it. Good choices. Yeah, no, I do a lot of different voice work. And I'm waiting for some scripts to be finished, and then I'll be doing some ASMR work again. It is on Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, but it is also on this channel, but I can't play it right now because we're doing ASMR. I still need to buy the video game that I'm in so that I can actually play it at some point. Who knows if it's any good? Might be awful. Wouldn't that be something? It's under my highlights if you're looking for it specifically. There you go. Oh no. Oh, we out of iron. Yes. There we go. That's all I needed. But how are you doing today, Maddie? You having a good day? That's fair, that's fair. I mean, do you enjoy ASMR? Or did you just get recommended me? Both are valid, you know. No, that's a pain. Oh no. Oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no. I feel you. Have a good day at work. For those of you who don't know what just happened, I accidentally used my chest, my barrel, as fuel for my hopper here, which was not what I was wanting to do. And I was so dumb. So dumb. Is what it is, I suppose. Is what it is. Well, I'm glad to hear that. Means we're getting some reach. There we are. Oh, what kind of fines do I want going down? I don't think I can just take one of these, can I? No. To let them grow organically. That's lame. We'll go grab some vines then. Can you imagine? And I will call you out for it. Be prepared. Whoops. Well, that happened. One second. That was almost bad. But we're alive. That's all that matters. Nap time, which video was it? If you don't mind me asking. Which one was the ASMR? Oh, the ASMR one? Like the boyfriend audio? The only ASMR I've done in like who knows how long. Nah, phone just thinks you're thirsty, that's all it is. I even do that kind anymore. Got sushi? Oh, I am jealous. I am jealous. You brought back some for the class, right? You brought back enough for everybody? I mean, you wouldn't not bring enough for everyone. Okay. Oh, I guess I am making pizza in a bit. I should probably get the pizza defrosted. That's fair, that's fair. I love those. I love the ones that are like the boyfriend accidentally causes the plague. Okay, now where is this? Okay, is that? That's what we're looking for. There we are. Nice. You don't listen to the boyfriend accidentally causing the plague? Why not? Oh, well, I wasn't the one to tie me up, so I have no clue what you said. That's fine, though. My mods tend to keep things pretty safe and secured. Boyfriend dreams and gets hit by a car. That's a good one. Alright, so this one is going to be... There it is. That's what I'm looking for. I'm so glad it's a common ASMR trigger because I always forget I just make these noises. And there we go. Mm-hmm. Perfect. Nice. No. Avocado equals death. Crazy. But like, if you tried not letting avocado kill you, because that also sounds like a skill issue. I mean, maybe this is a personal belief, but it sounds like a skill issue. Oh. Don't get distracted. 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 It's fine, Anna. You don't have to tell me. I believe my mom's probably chose the right action. And I appreciate the apology. Don't get distracted. Hey, Maddie. Madeline. Don't get distracted right now. Why are you so distracted? You should pay attention to what you're doing. There we go. Peel the avocado. Exactly. I am a good distraction. I like to think I'm a good distraction. She'll go calm. Wait. Oh, that's so dumb. I hadn't thought about that. Very cool. Interesting. That blocks just enough sunlight that it causes an issue. Or, torchlight. Have you checked out the TikTok? 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 Please tell me you've checked out the TikTok. Go check out the TikTok. It's so good. I'm doing some good stuff right now. The TikTok. I make content every single day. That's LuckyJene VD. I make content almost every single day. I only haven't done on the weekend, okay? Fine, Carmia. I will post content every single day. From now on. You've done this to me. No. been challenged. Did you hear that, chat? They called me challenging. Am I not challenging? I mean... Anyways, next question. Yeah, like, I don't hate you that much, Gene. There we go. Shoot. I have a problem. Don't bonk me. Why are you bonking me? How dare you? Rude. See, we have a problem. I don't have any string, so I can't make a bow, which is a problem. Because that's the whole reason why I'm already making a like monster farming area. So I suppose that's the worst thing in the world. But like, you know, I need to get enough iron to start fixing my shields. Just have to clear out so much more. Well, chat, it looks like it's about time for me to end stream. So let's end somewhere safe. I've gotten a few skellies in here already. Come at me, bro. I don't have a bow, though. Oh, you mean if I get one from a skelly? Yeah. You've come to a conclusion? What's your conclusion? Well, I'm ending stream, and it's definitely not for that reason. I mean, I don't know what anybody's talking about. I mean, I'm just me ending stream because of that. That would be crazy. Anyways, I gotta go, guys. Y'all been great. It's been fantastic. Bye, lovelies. Bye. Awful burger, awful burger, awful burger, awful burger. I've had it so many times now because people keep paying for me to get more of them, and I hate them. They're such awful burgers. A waste of burger. Like, they make me so unhappy. They make me so unhappy. Burgers. Alright, so I don't really like this bot, by the way. I need to turn it off completely. We're gonna disconnect my channel. There we go. But I might use this. Well, this is pointless. Okay, I guess I'll choose you. We've raided into Yuki before. We're gonna raid into Yuki again. There we go. EB raids. There you go, chat. So you all be the best you can be. I'm gonna go to work, and I'll see you all, well, later. See you at 4 p.m. MST. Bye.